Great news this past week. They just announced that there is a Singapore-Philippines vaccinated travel lane, or VTL. That's the biggest news. That's probably the biggest news that I'm really happy to hear. My name is George, and I'm a Filipino-American based in Singapore for the past 10 years. Welcome to Saturday Uncut, and in this video series, it's completely unedited or uncut from start to finish, and it's something for me to practice building my confidence on camera. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to my channel, and you can also find me on social media through the link in the link description below. Wow, I think I need to drink water before I continue. Okay, so it was just announced that there is going to be a VTL between Singapore and the Philippines. What does this mean? What this essentially means is that Singapore is officially open to short-term visitors from the Philippines or tourists. My parents could come over here as long as they are fully vaccinated, and I think there are certain requirements which I'll leave in the description below. What this means though is that travel essentially starting this March, going to the Philippines, I don't need to quarantine anymore, and people coming back here or going here don't need to quarantine as long as they tick several boxes like fully vaccinated. I think they have to buy travel insurance and some paperwork, but other than that, this country is open again. How does this work? Starting this March, fully vaccinated travelers originating directly from the Philippines can enter Singapore on designated VTL flights, if I am not mistaken. Honestly, if you're gonna come to Singapore, I would probably recommend you fly on, I don't know, Singapore Airlines. Yeah, I think it's a good time if you haven't yet to follow Philippine Airlines, Singapore Airlines, the carriers, and get more information from them on if they have specific flights between Manila and Singapore. That's what I would do. I understand that within 24 hours of arrival here in Singapore, that you have to get an administered antigen rapid test. That's within 24 hours, and of course has to be negative. And after that, I understand that you're free to go. That's it. You could fly into Singapore, get your test within 24 hours. It's an antigen rapid test. It's not even the other one, the PCR. And once that's negative, you're free to go. You can go anywhere. You can start your tour here in Singapore. I'll leave a link in the description to most of the to where you can where you can get more up-to-date information. Today's not my day. Why this matters? A VTL. So Singapore has already existing VTLs with like other countries like Germany, South Korea, and the United States. And the news that they just gave out last week, it's with Thailand. It's for the rest of Thailand. It's with the UAE. It's with other countries because Singapore is gradually opening up. What this means is that it is good. Why this matters is that it is good for local businesses here in Singapore. So, I've been around Singapore, leaving the house. I go to Chinatown, and it's always sad to see, some businesses shuttered. To see the tables, the chairs on the table. Like Chinatown Food Street right now, it's closed, and it's really sad. If you go to Chinatown, it's normally a very festive place. But yeah. It's also great for tourism as well to resume. If you're in aviation, if you are in tourism, these industries are obviously super affected by this whole pandemic. So it's nice to see Singapore inch forward very cautiously. I think hopefully this is good news as the country begins to open up. Hopefully this is good for people who work in tourism as well as aviation. And why this matters as well, this news, is that I get to see friends and family. So hopefully maybe at some point this year, 2022, so my family or my friends can come visit Singapore. And once you come visit Singapore, let me know, because I'll give you all the recommendations of things to do in the city. All right. I guess what you're going to ask next is, how is it like in Singapore for people who are planning to come visit? So in Singapore, the situation has been pretty stable. They were aggressive. I think it's the aggressiveness of the vaccination. I think more than 90% of the country is fully vaccinated, and I think more than half at this point, when I'm making this video, more than half are boosted as well. So I think it's because of the strategy that to quickly vaccinate the population. So the population of Singapore is just 6 million, I think 5 million. it's sort of made them comfortable. You know, they do monitor like the rate, what do you call the death rate, the mortality rate from this. Um, yeah, it's been it's a cautious approach that they've been doing. It hasn't been an approach that is appreciated by all, because you know, in other countries, like maybe in the West or in Europe or in the United States, they've opened up more, they're faster. But here in Singapore, it's sort of a relief to see things, you know, opening up gradually. This is the strategy that they're taking, so let's hope that it is good. On a very practical level, in Singapore, wearing masks outside is mandatory. Right now, as of this video, you can only gather in groups of up to 5 people. And you have to use an app called Trace Together. So of course, almost all countries out there have some type of contact tracing app. I'm not sure what the future of Trace Together is going to be like, but as of this video, we still have a Trace Together. So you scan QR codes to enter hotels, to go to before you go into restaurants, and then once you scan the QR code, your screen lights up green if you're fully vaccinated. So, and that's when you could go in and dine in. Yeah, how is it like when you go out in Singapore? People are in masks. It feels like life is sort of going back to normal, I guess. Although you can't, you know, gather in groups larger than 5, but it's pretty doable, I'd say. Yeah, I foresee families can enjoy themselves. Tourists can come and hopefully enjoy themselves. Alright, so next I'm going to talk about some tips that I have for those coming in. Okay, I'm not an expert, but these are just really my wholehearted tips as someone who lives here, who has been in Singapore since this pandemic started. Excuse me. First, it's to abide by Singapore's laws and protocols. It's to be respectful. That is what I would say to tourists coming here to visit, especially from the Philippines. Although I think generally Filipinos, when they travel, they're very considerate, they're kind. We might tend to laugh loudly, but that's it really. I think Filipinos are a bit more respectful and appreciative. I think Filipinos are always like we have that thing. I can't describe it. But yeah, if you're coming to Singapore, to abide by the laws and protocols that the country has put in place. Yeah, I don't think that's really a big concern for Filipinos, because we have our culture's like that. We tend to be more respectful. On the practical level, don't worry about, on the practical level, it would be great to have extra masks, hand sanitizers in your bag and all of that. But don't worry if you don't, because you could easily get access to masks, rapid test kits, hand sanitizers, even toilet paper. Everything is, you know, there's no short supply on these if you're coming to visit, so you could just pop into a 7-Eleven, a Fair Price, Cold Storage, or any supermarket and pick these up. You wouldn't have any problem procuring these. And hopefully your accommodation, some hotels are providing like what do you call this, like a care kit or something. Maybe your hotel could be providing masks as well. It's important to have masks. I always have a pouch in my bag with extra masks when I'm out and about, so I could change it if I sneeze or something, or if I ate and yeah, it's good to have these extra ones in your bag. Another important tip is to double check that the attractions that you're probably wanting to visit, you gotta check if the timing is, you know, that they're open, or maybe the timing is different, or maybe there's social distancing, or safe measurement. Damn it, it's called SMM, safe management measures, safety. Basta yan. These attractions in Singapore, they might have a cap on how many people could enter an attraction at a certain time. So if I were you, if you're coming to Singapore, don't expect it to be pre-pandemic. If you're going to Universal Studios, check if it's open on that day. Probably is, but check if the timing, if you need to book specifically. Maybe they don't do walk-ins, because a lot of that is happening here. You can't just really walk in too much. You gotta, plan. I would plan it in advance, just to make sure. And all their websites have it posted there anyway, what they're doing and what their schedule is like. Definitely check up on the opening hours and see if there are any restrictions happening. And another tip is to, if I were you, if you're coming to visit Singapore, do follow the social media accounts, or check out the websites of the local news outlets like Channel News Asia, Straits Times. Also take a look at the Ministry of Health. So the Ministry of Health is like the Singapore equivalent of the Department of Health. So the Ministry of Health sounds really cool, right? The MOH, they have it's really detailed and organized on their website how they, if you want to see what the situation is on the ground here, definitely drop by that website just to take a look, at a sense of what's happening, and to also understand how it's like for Singaporeans and residents. And lastly, probably the biggest tip is also travel only if you feel absolutely well. Don't take shortcuts or conceal your sickness. I'm sure, you don't want to go in Singapore as a tourist and then be sickly, even if you're negative. Maybe you are negative but you're sick, I don't know. I would come here only if you're absolutely sure that you're healthy, that you feel confident you could enjoy the humidity of Singapore. You could enjoy yourself. Yeah. Oh, I think I've ranted a bit. That's how excited I am that there's a VTL, vaccinated travel lane, between the Philippines and Singapore. And they also, for people like me on a work pass here, that means, if I'm not mistaken, they've also removed what you call the VTP, or the vaccinated travel pass. That's like an additional layer of clearance that you have to get to re-enter Singapore. So if I'm not mistaken, they've removed that, which is even better news, because now it encourages me that I'm fully vaxxed, I've boosted, that I can go back home to in the Philippines. They've removed quarantine as well, right? So I could go back to the Philippines and come back here. There are less restrictions. I think that's really the biggest piece of news 2 years into this pandemic. But as you know, things could rapidly change anytime. So I'm just reporting on what currently exists for February 2022. We reached the end of my video, so please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel if you haven't yet, and also following me on social media. The links are down below. My name is George, and if you're coming back to Singapore, welcome back.